Lamentations chapter 4 continues the prophet's lament over the destruction of Jerusalem, focusing on the profound devastation and the suffering of the people. The chapter begins by describing the fall of Jerusalem as a tragic reversal of its former glory. The once beautiful city, whose leaders and people were cherished, is now desolate. The gold has become dim, and the precious stones are scattered. The chapter compares the dire condition of the city to the starving, weakened state of the people, particularly the children, who suffer from famine and thirst. The city's noble women and priests, once revered, are now humbled and brought low by the destruction and judgment that has befallen them. The prophet reflects on the horrific consequences of the people's sin and how it led to their suffering. The chapter contrasts the fate of the righteous and the wicked. The righteous, who once were esteemed, are now perishing in the streets, while the wicked, who had once thrived, are now abandoned. The imagery of the city's leaders and people covered in ashes and filth emphasizes how the sins of the nation have brought about their downfall. The once protected city has now been left desolate, with no comfort or aid from those who once offered protection. The prophet mourns the loss of security and peace that the people once knew. The suffering is not only physical but emotional and spiritual, as the people feel forsaken by God. The chapter continues with a sense of hopelessness, as even those who once had the strength to survive now struggle to endure. The prophet specifically laments the plight of the women who have seen their children die from starvation, while others have been carried away into captivity. The devastation has reached every aspect of life, leaving no corner untouched. Despite their great suffering, the people are left to wonder about the extent of God's judgment and what their future holds. The chapter concludes with the recognition that Jerusalem's enemies, particularly Edom, will also face judgment for their role in the city's destruction. The prophet calls for justice, noting that those who have been the instruments of suffering for God's people will not go unpunished. There is an underlying plea for restoration and healing, but also a deep acknowledgement that the pain and suffering must be endured as a result of the nation's sins. The chapter ends with a note of sorrow and the continuing hope for God's intervention, yet it also highlights the need for repentance and reconciliation with God. Let's now read Lamentations chapter 4. How has the gold become dim? How is the most fine gold changed? The stones of the sanctuary are poured out on the top of every street. The precious sons of Zion, comparable to fine gold, how are they esteemed as earthen pitchers, the work of the hands of the potter? Even the sea monsters draw out the breast, they give suck to their young ones. The daughter of my people is become cruel, like the ostriches in the wilderness. The tongue of the sucking child cleaveth to the roof of his mouth for thirst. The young children ask bread, and no man breaketh it unto them. They that did feed delicately are desolate in the streets, they that were brought up in scarlet embrace dunghills. For the punishment of the iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the punishment of the sin of Sodom, that was overthrown as in a moment, and no hand stayed on her. Her Nazarites were purer than snow, they were whiter than milk, they were more ruddy in body than rubies, their polishing was of sapphire. Their visage is blacker than a coal, they are not known in the streets, their skin cleaveth to their bones, it is withered, it is become like a stick. They that be slain with the sword are better than they that be slain with hunger, for these pine away, stricken through for one of the fruits of the field. The hands of the pitiful women have sodden their own children, they were their meat in the destruction of the daughter of my people. The Lord hath accomplished his fury, he hath poured out his fierce anger, and hath kindled a fire in Zion, and it hath devoured the foundations thereof. The kings of the earth, and all the inhabitants of the world, would not have believed that the adversary and the enemy should have entered into the gates of Jerusalem. For the sins of her prophets, and the iniquities of her priests, that have shed the blood of the just in the midst of her. They have wandered as blind men in the streets, they have polluted themselves with blood, so that men could not touch their garments. They cried unto them, Depart ye, it is unclean, depart, depart, touch not. When they fled away and wandered, they said among the heathen, they shall no more sojourn there. The anger of the Lord hath divided them, he will no more regard them. They respected not the persons of the priests, they favored not the elders. As for us, our eyes as yet failed for our vain help. In our watching we have watched for a nation that could not save us. They hunt our steps, that we cannot go in our streets. Our end is near, our days are fulfilled, for our end is come. Our persecutors are swifter than the eagles of the heaven. They pursued us upon the mountains, they laid wait for us in the wilderness. The breath of our nostrils, the anointed of the Lord, was taken in their pits, of whom we said, under his shadow we shall live among the heathen. Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwellest in the land of Uz. The cup also shall pass through unto thee, thou shalt be drunken, and shalt make thyself naked. The punishment of thine iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion, he will no more carry thee away into captivity. He will visit thine iniquity, O daughter of Edom, he will discover thy sins. This ends our reading of Lamentations chapter 4.